Jerry Seinfeld in this interview revealed something that perfectly captures how the wealthy elite really think about human suffering. In a conversation with Norm MacDonald, Seinfeld laid out his philosophy on homeless people, and it's more telling than any comedy bit he's ever written. This isn't just about one rich comedian's bad take. This is about how extreme wealth warps your ability to see other human beings as human beings. Norm's reaction tells you everything you need to know about the difference between genuine humanity and manufactured compassion. Seinfeld's reasoning exposes the psychological mechanisms that allow the wealthy to sleep peacefully while people die on the streets outside their penthouses.
Do you think there is such a thing?
And as what? As a supreme being?
No, an eternal being.
I think we all are.
Oh,
I think we're all in different chapters of an endless story.
We're all eternal beings, aren't we? And if we look at each other like that, how could we ever turn down a homeless person's request for something?
I think you could. I could.
You could, huh?
Yes.
Right off the bat, Seinfeld reveals the fundamental disconnect between his stated philosophy and his actual behavior. He starts with this almost spiritual premise: we're all eternal, we're all connected, but then immediately pivots to justifying why he ignores homeless people. This is classic wealthy liberal cognitive dissonance. They want to maintain their self-image as enlightened, compassionate people while simultaneously justifying their complete indifference to human suffering that happens right in front of them. Seinfeld knows he's supposed to care about homeless people, so he's crafting an intellectual framework that allows him to not care while still feeling morally superior about it.
I don't think it's helping these people.
You never
sometimes.
walked past a homeless person and they're begging you as a fellow human being for something, and you ignore them and you maybe feel some evil bile come up?
No, sometimes I think if I give this person money, I'm kind of agreeing that you can't get out of this situation.
Well, but what if they can't?
I don't know if they can or they can't.
This is where Seinfeld's argument becomes absolutely disgusting. He's reframing his selfishness as compassion. According to Jerry, giving money to homeless people is actually cruel because it suggests they can't improve their situation. This is the kind of twisted logic that only someone with hundreds of millions of dollars could come up with. Seinfeld is essentially arguing that ignoring desperate human beings is actually the moral choice because it demonstrates his faith in their potential. This is psychological manipulation at its finest. He's taking his natural impulse to avoid uncomfortable encounters with human suffering and dressing it up as philosophical wisdom. The reality is much simpler. Seinfeld doesn't want to be inconvenienced by homeless people, and he's created an elaborate justification for his indifference. Norm MacDonald's response here is devastating in its simplicity. While Seinfeld is constructing these elaborate philosophical justifications, Norm cuts straight to the heart of the matter. What if the person actually can't get out of their situation? What if Seinfeld's assumptions are wrong? Norm is demonstrating actual human empathy by acknowledging uncertainty and erring on the side of compassion. Seinfeld's response reveals that he's not actually interested in whether his assumptions are correct. He's already decided that homeless people don't deserve his help, and he's working backwards to justify that decision. This exchange perfectly captures the difference between someone who still has their humanity intact and someone who has had it systematically eroded by extreme wealth and privilege. The broader context here is crucial. Seinfeld is worth approximately $950 million. He made this fortune largely from a show about nothing, literally about the mundane experiences of privileged New Yorkers who never had to worry about real problems. Now he's arguing that people sleeping on the streets should be ignored for their own good. Seinfeld isn't just being callous, it's a perfect case study in how extreme wealth corrupts moral reasoning. Seinfeld has reached a level of financial security that's so far removed from normal human experience that he's lost the ability to relate to genuine desperation. But there's something even more insidious happening here. Seinfeld isn't just admitting that he ignores homeless people, he's trying to convince others that ignoring homeless people is actually the moral choice. He's using his influence to spread a philosophy that encourages indifference to human suffering. Let's talk about what homelessness actually looks like, because Seinfeld clearly has no idea. When you're homeless, you're not just lacking shelter, you're trapped in a system designed to keep you trapped. First, try getting a job when you don't have an address. Most employers require a permanent address for tax purposes, direct deposit, and basic communication. Even if you manage to get hired somewhere, how do you show up to work clean and presentable when you have no access to showers, laundry facilities, or a safe place to store clean clothes? But let's say you somehow overcome those obstacles. Where do you sleep while you're working your minimum wage job? Homeless shelters, if you can get into one, typically kick everyone out at 6 a.m. and don't let you back in until evening. Many shelters have waiting lists that are months long. The ones that do have space often have strict rules: no personal belongings, no pets, mandatory religious services, zero tolerance policies that can get you banned for minor infractions. Many homeless people avoid shelters entirely because they're dangerous, overcrowded, and psychologically traumatic. So you're working, but you're still sleeping outside or in your car if you're lucky enough to have one. Now try maintaining your mental health under these conditions. Chronic sleep deprivation, constant stress about safety, the daily humiliation of being treated as subhuman by people who see you as a nuisance rather than a person. The psychological toll is devastating, and it compounds every other problem you're trying to solve. Here's what Seinfeld doesn't understand about the economics of being homeless: everything costs more when you're poor. You can't buy food in bulk and store it, so you pay premium prices for single servings. You can't cook, so you're dependent on prepared foods or restaurants. You can't maintain a bank account without an address, so you pay check cashing fees and can't build credit. You can't afford the upfront costs of housing: first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, utility deposits, even if you're making some money. Let's talk about the health aspect, because this is where Seinfeld's ignorance becomes especially cruel. Homelessness destroys your physical health rapidly. Exposure to weather, inadequate nutrition, lack of medical care, stress-related illnesses, injuries from violence or accidents with no safe place to recover. Many homeless people develop chronic conditions that make employment impossible, but they can't access consistent health care to treat these conditions. It becomes a death spiral where your health deteriorates, making it harder to work, making it harder to escape homelessness, making your health worse. And then there's the legal system, which criminalizes homelessness itself. Sleeping outside is illegal. Loitering is illegal. Public urination is illegal, even when there are no public restrooms available. Homeless people rack up fines and court dates they can't pay or attend, leading to warrants and jail time. Having a criminal record makes it even harder to find employment or housing. The system literally punishes people for being homeless while providing no legal alternatives. Mental illness and addiction complicate everything further, but here's what people like Seinfeld don't understand: these are often consequences of homelessness, not just causes. The trauma of living on the streets, the constant dehumanization, the hopelessness of the situation drives people to self-medicate or causes psychological breaks. Even people who become homeless due to mental illness or addiction face barriers that make recovery nearly impossible without housing stability. Now let's talk about what it takes to actually escape homelessness, because Seinfeld seems to think it's just a matter of trying harder. First, you need enough money for housing deposits, typically thousands of dollars up front. You need to pass credit checks and background checks, which is impossible if you've been living on the streets. You need employment history and references, which are hard to maintain when you're homeless. You need to stay clean and sober if addiction is involved, but detox and rehabilitation require stable housing to be effective. Even if you somehow manage to get temporary housing, you're not out of the woods. Many formerly homeless people cycle back into homelessness because they haven't addressed the underlying issues that caused their situation, or because they can't maintain the employment necessary to pay rent on minimum wage jobs. The affordable housing shortage means that even working people can't afford market-rate housing in most cities. Seinfeld's suggestion that giving money to homeless people somehow enables their situation reveals his complete ignorance about what money actually means to someone in that position. That $5 or $10 could mean the difference between eating that day or not. It could mean a few hours in a laundromat to wash clothes before a job interview. It could mean a phone call to a family member or social services. It could mean the difference between sleeping in a doorway or paying for a night in the cheapest motel available. But here's the most perverse part of Seinfeld's philosophy. He's essentially arguing that homeless people should suffer more in order to motivate them to escape their situation. This reveals a sociopathic level of disconnection from human empathy. He's suggesting that people who are already experiencing the most extreme form of social and economic marginalization need additional punishment to inspire them to change their circumstances. The reality is that homelessness is a structural problem that requires structural solutions. Countries that have significantly reduced homelessness, like Finland, Denmark, and others, did it through massive public investment in housing, mental health services, addiction treatment, and social support systems. They didn't do it by having rich comedians ignore poor people on the street. Seinfeld's attitude represents everything that's wrong with American individualism taken to its logical extreme. He's turned systemic failure into personal responsibility, structural violence into individual choice, and social neglect into tough love. This allows him to maintain his wealth and privilege without feeling any obligation to address the conditions that create and maintain homelessness. The most disgusting aspect of his argument is that he's not content to simply ignore homeless people himself. He's actively trying to convince others that ignoring them is morally superior. He's using his influence to spread a philosophy that increases human suffering while allowing the perpetrators to feel good about themselves. This is how societies normalize cruelty, by reframing it as wisdom. When Seinfeld talks about not wanting to agree that you can't get out of this situation, he's revealing his fundamental belief that homelessness is a choice or a failure of will. This belief allows him to avoid confronting the reality that homelessness exists because people like him hoard resources while others have nothing. It allows him to avoid acknowledging that his extreme wealth exists in direct relationship to other people's extreme poverty. The truth is that Seinfeld could personally end homelessness for hundreds of people without significantly impacting his lifestyle. His net worth of nearly $1 billion means he could provide housing, healthcare, and support services for entire communities of homeless people. Instead, he chooses to philosophize about why ignoring them is actually helping them. This isn't just cruelty, it's a systematic dehumanization designed to protect his psychological comfort while people die on the streets outside his multiple mansions.